From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. Well, as we speak, as of this recording, the jury in the hush money trial of the Orange Menace, they've gone into deliberations. They've got about 4.5 hours under their belt. So, by the time you hear this, there could be a verdict. It could happen on Thursday. It could happen on Friday. It could happen next week. If it happens quickly, maybe I'll do a quick turnaround bonus episode, as I do when something big breaks. But we'll see. The experts aren't predicting, so I'm certainly not going to predict. It could be guilty, of course. It could be not guilty. It could be a hung jury. Bottom line, and this is my prediction, nothing changes politically. Everybody declares a win. The Orange Menace, of course, declares it rigged, unless, of course, he's acquitted. In that case, the jury is brilliant. But I can't imagine that happening. I can't imagine a full acquittal. That seems crazy. I can see a hung jury. I can see partial. I don't see a full acquittal. That just seems nuts, just from what I know from media coverage. But the most important thing for us is the political ramifications. The couple of polls that came out recently, we can't rely too much on the polls, but this was interesting. A Marquette poll among those asked how they'd vote if Trump were found guilty. Now, these are pretty big numbers. Biden was favored 43-39, with 18% favoring someone else or not voting. 43-39 if Trump were found guilty. If found not guilty, reverse that. 44% for the Orange Menace, 38% for Biden. And that same 18% still for someone else or not voting. That's a pretty big swing. Those are big numbers. That's an interesting poll result. And Marquette poll is certainly distinguished as reliable, and they're not just some fly-by-night operation. So that's something. I mean, that's something. The polls, if you've watched, they have not moved for forever, like a year. And the Orange Menace remains leading in the swing states by hefty margins. Toss-up in Wisconsin, he's up by hefty single digits in Pennsylvania, Michigan, up big numbers in Nevada, in North Carolina, Arizona. So Georgia, my God, it just looks really bad. And also, I really need to mention this because, again, we can't. I'll talk about the trial and the verdict if and when it comes in the next few days. But for the moment, let's just stick on these issues. Another poll. Let's see. Was this from PBS? Shoot, I don't have a source on this. I'm looking at PBS News citing The Guardian, but I don't know who actually conducted the poll. But the numbers. Okay, listen to this. Listen to these numbers. Misconceptions about the economy. All right. 55% believe the economy is shrinking. A majority of Americans believe that the economy is shrinking. And 56%, about the same number, think the U.S. is experiencing a recession, which is just the opposite of the truth. The economy is not shrinking, it's growing, and, as we've mentioned on this program many times, growing at a rate higher than all other comparable countries. Faster, higher than Europe, just beating the pants off China. And yet, a majority of Americans believe the exact opposite. So they've been bamboozled. 49% believe the S&P 500 stock market index is down for the year. In truth, the index went up about 24% in 2023 and is up more than 12% this year. The stock market registering record highs, all-time highs. 49%, half of Americans believe that unemployment is at a 50-year high, when actually unemployment has been under 4% now for like 2 years. That's almost a 50-year low. So crazy. That's just crazy. I'm not going to spend the whole program here citing polls, but I got to go to one more. So you just heard those crazy numbers. The Orange Menace leading in virtually every swing state. Wisconsin, it's a toss-up. He's leading by significant numbers in the others. Half or more than half of Americans believe the exact opposite when it comes to the economy. And more about that in a minute. And then this poll. Okay, and this is the real kicker. If you can turn the show off after this. If you get nothing else out of this episode, I want you to hear these numbers. This was an NBC poll that I hadn't heard about. It was a few weeks ago now. But it was cited by the guys on Pod Save America, and I happened to hear it. So I went back and looked it up. In the Biden versus the Orange Menace race, Biden leads by 49% of those who get their news from newspapers. People who get their news from newspapers favor Biden by 49 points. So they asked people where they got their news and then asked them who they favored in the election. Those who get their news from network television news, Biden wins by 20 points. Those who get their news from digital news sites, Biden wins by 10 points. When the overall numbers, as you know, has him losing consistently poll after poll. Biden loses among those who get their news from social media, cable news, Google, and YouTube. The largest deficit, the Orange Menace over Biden, those who don't follow political news at all. They know nothing about what's going on. The Orange Menace leads with that group by 26 points. So what does that tell you? I mean, it's right there. This requires no analysis. The analysis is just in the numbers. A 49-point lead among those who get their news from newspapers? Of course, you're going to say, well, those are older people. Okay, fine, maybe. And it's a small group. Yeah, I'll give you that. But still, when he's losing generally all, the aggregate of all polls, he's losing by 2 or 3 or 5 points. 20 points for those who get their news from network television news. And you know me, I'm the biggest critic of media. But when you break these down, newspapers, network television, and digital news sites are far and away more reliable than social media, cable news, Google, and YouTube. So those who are getting disinformation, misinformation, or no information want the Orange Menace. Those who have just some little bit of an idea of what's actually going on favor President Joe anywhere from 10 to 49 points. Crazy numbers. Big. Those are big numbers. And it points to a problem, right? We need media reform. We just absolutely have to get the profit out of media. Absolutely have to. And we somehow have to make it fun, cool, acceptable, I don't know, and in vogue to care, to know what's going on. I can't tell you how many people I know in my own circle, family, friends, who just can't be bothered. It's too depressing. It's too complicated. It's not my problem. I don't know. I don't care. They're all the same. They're all terrible. All these excuses we hear about not paying attention and not caring. I'm not political, or it doesn't really matter. You just have to change yourself, or all these weird, horrible excuses we hear by well-meaning people, I guess. Wow. And I need to get back to something also this poll really tells us that we have to think about, or all the polls. Why in the world is he still leading the Orange Menace? Well, given the option, if it's a binary choice, it's really hard for me to even understand. It gets down to the people who just have no idea what's going on, the people we just talked about. And if you do know what's going on, then you just have to really not care or somehow believe that, oh, he's not that bad. You have to believe a lot. You really have to jump through a lot of hoops. And I'm not sure how people are able to do that. To actually believe that policies are going to be somehow better, that their lives are going to be somehow better. And I think that's the bottom line. And I don't know what Joe and the Democrats have to do in the next 5 months to turn this around. I don't know if they can. But you can't rely on those numbers I cited in the poll, how, the stock market's doing great, unemployment is low. You can't keep telling people that the economy is doing great and then tell them to ignore their own lying eyes. When half or more of Americans have no savings, half or more of Americans are 5 or 6 digits in debt, they're living paycheck to paycheck, they can't afford, the price of their car, needing a major repair, no job security. You can't just look these people in the eye and say everything's fine. Everything's not fine for these people. And they have every right to be upset about it. And they have every right to blame the so-called elites. Now, to take all that truth and then somehow twist it into the idea that the Orange Menace is going to make anything better, that's a crazy leap. But God bless these people. They just don't know, I guess. They actually believe it. So their critique is right. They can. I always say, no one's a better expert about their own lives than the people themselves. You can't tell them everything's great when they know they're $25,000 in debt or maybe more. Maybe they got a $100,000 student loan still to pay off. Maybe they have medical debt. They got a car that's, ready to break down. They can't afford a new one. Rents are rising. Mortgages are rising. They can't afford. There are just too many people in this position. And yes, both things can be true at the same time because we've seen it for quite a while. When all the macro numbers look fantastic, they're just going off the charts. Oh, we're doing great. Like, I said it myself just earlier. We're beating the pants off China. We're leading Europe. We're leading the world in the macro numbers. But when that doesn't filter down to people and their actual lives, well, what good are the numbers? So somehow, Joe and the Democrats have to thread that needle. They have to somehow say, yeah, you are screwed. But they can't do it because they are so locked in with the establishment. They can't escape that elitist label they're being stuck with because they've earned it and they deserve it. They are the elites. They are the ones holding up institutions that are oppressing half or more of the American population. The people who are struggling aren't wrong about their own lives. And they can read a headlines like total U.S. billionaire wealth up 88% over 4 years, when Jeff Bezos made over $7.9 million an hour last year. Jeff Bezos made almost $8 million an hour. An hour. In just 13 minutes, he made the equivalent of what a typical person earns in a lifetime. Oh my God. Here, let me source this for you. I want you to know, I want to know what I'm reading here. This is from inequality.org. Inequality.org has been tracking inequality-related news and views for nearly 2 decades, a project of the Institute for Policy Studies. Okay, so that's who our source is. Take that for what it's worth. $8 million an hour last year, Jeff Bezos. So, yeah. And 4 years ago, this week, the Dow closed at 19,200. As of the writing of this article, 38,700, trading at 38,700. So the Dow doubles. Jeff Bezos and his billionaire buddies have upped their wealth up to 88%. While we keep hearing the wages are growing, but, again, talk to the person getting that paycheck. Look at your own paycheck. Look, I'm talking to you. You probably know this better than I do. If there has been a bump in your salary, I'm sure it hasn't been 88%. And I'll bet you dollars to donuts, as my sainted mother used to say, that it hasn't kept up with your rent or your mortgage or the grocery bill. I can pretty much guarantee that. People can't even afford to buy a car anymore, can't afford the payments. Some people can, some people are doing great. And they're the ones who just, they don't care. They'll vote for the Orange Menace. They'll not vote at all. They're not political. I don't know. See, that's the thing. The people are right about their own lives. And that's why populism is in the driver's seat for the foreseeable future. When people say the elites are screwing us, they're right. They know. But we haven't had a left-wing populist in this country for a while. We had Bernie, but Bernie was sabotaged by the Democratic Party. Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, the elites, the establishment of the Democratic Party were not going to let Bernie Sanders win. It was not going to happen on their watch, and they saw to it. I'm not going to keep going back to 2016 and 2020, but both of those years, especially 2016, Bernie Sanders would have wiped the floor with the Orange Menace because it's all about populism in the best sense of the word. Now, populism can be a very dirty word. Once again, my usual reminder, be careful with jargon. Right-wing populists, like the Orange Menace, aren't really populists. They don't care about the people, but all of their rhetoric is about populism. That's how they sell the brand. They sell the brand by railing against the establishment and the elites. Look at somebody as crazy as RFK Jr. I can see why he's getting 10, 15, sometimes 20% in some places, in some polls. Because he's very good about talking about how the corporations and the establishment and the elites are controlling things and you're getting screwed every day of your life. He's very good at that. Don't let me be an RFK apologist, okay? I wouldn't vote for him in a million years based on most of his policies. But put the policies aside for a second. We're just looking at the critique. The critique is right. When RFK says the elites are screwing you, he's absolutely 100% right. When the Orange Menace says that the elites are screwing you, he's absolutely right. And in his case, it's kind of like the broken clock being right once or twice a day. You know, that whole thing. Just because it serves him. But the point is, it resonates with people because they understand it in their bones, but they don't know what to do with it. They don't know what to do about it except shake their fist and raise their torches like the angry mob yelling at the Frankenstein monster, which is actually a great analogy. That's what the current establishment is. That's what capitalism is. It's this big, horrible Frankenstein's monster. I mean, I love that analogy. I've used it before. The Democratic Party thinks, like Dr. Frankenstein, they can somehow tame this horrible monster when everybody else realizes that, you're just going to have to kill it. Well, that's what capitalism is. That's what corporate profits are. And it has to be killed. We got to break up the joint and start new. That's what populism is, and that's why people are so afraid of it. So the critique, even from people like the Orange Menace and RFK, is correct. It's the same because it's the same critique that Bernie had. Now comes the big difference. RFK's solutions, I'm not even sure because he's just so off the charts wacko. I don't even understand whatever part of his brain was eaten by the worm. I don't know what's going on with RFK. I'm not going to try to even guess. He's just nuts. But we've seen the Orange Menace playbook before. He's living in the mid-20th century and aligning himself with guys like Hitler and Mussolini. I had a college professor once who said something that really stuck with me. And that was that different people of different political philosophies seem to be stuck in different times. We don't just have different ideas. It's like we're stuck in a different mindset. Like Joe lives in the 20th century, right? He lives in the 1900s, kind of FDR, New Deal, kind of happy America, government intervention can make wonderful things happen. And you have the Peace Corps with John Kennedy and the Great Society with Lyndon Johnson. And that's where Biden lives. He's in the 20th century. Most Republicans live in the 19th century. They literally go back to the 1800s for their abortion laws and the ridiculous ideas of, they're perfectly comfortable with the oligarchy and with monopolies. And, they're pre-trust busting days. Whereas Bernie's kind of a 20th century guy too, but he's a progressive 20th century guy. He's more like a fighting Bob LaFollette kind of guy. Labor. Wouldn't it be nice if some of us would try to drag ourselves into the 21st century, maybe even think in terms of the 22nd century, because it's right around the corner. That's where our kids are, and certainly our grandkids are going to live in the 22nd century. Shouldn't we be thinking that way a little bit? Decisions we make today about democracy, about climate change, about labor, economic policy, etc., they're going to have profound implications on their lives and their children's lives. And by any moral standard, it's our absolute duty to act with that in mind. So we need a left-wing populism in this country. There's been nothing to compete with the right-wing populism. And that's why I think, even though it just sickens me to say so, that's why the Orange Menace leads in all these polls. People who rightly understand their own pathetic lives, and then you put them in a coalition with the really bad people, the kind of rich, mean, evil oligarch types who don't give a shit about us. There are those people too. But right now I'm talking about the regular schmucks who know their lives suck and they can't stand Joe Biden and Jill Biden and Kamala Harris and all the rest of them telling them how great things are. We need a left-wing populism. It's the only thing that's ever going to defeat the right-wing populists, because the constant here is populism. It's here to stay for the foreseeable future. I can't imagine that changing, I don't know, in a generation, 2, 3, 4. I don't know how many generations. Populism is the new constant. It's here. And the capital D Democratic Party has got one finger up their nose and the other finger up their butt, and they don't know what the hell they're doing. They destroyed Bernie Sanders, their best chance at moving this country in the right direction. And with groups like AIPAC that are now controlling the Democratic Party, they're damn near close to destroying Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the entire progressive wing of the Democratic Party. So what can we do? My advice, you got to go left. You can't be content with just riding that sort of center that keeps shifting further and further to the right, because the crazier the right wing gets and the more quote unquote reasonable the centrist Democrats become, always trying to work with both sides, always trying to compromise. Well, that only means that the political center keeps shifting right every year, just inches over, sometimes more than inches. Sometimes it lurches by great lengths to the right, so that now the political center in this country, and I'm talking about from the people who run things, not from all of us, but the political center, the acceptable center that can get you elected, that can keep you in power, that can keep you in cahoots with the elites, you got to inch further and further right. That's where that political center keeps shifting. And those of us who consider ourselves on the left, if you're still a capital D Democrat and you have to keep compromising and capitulating, you're only contributing to that rightward shift of the center. We have to embrace the actual left, a real Labor Party, a left-wing party, an anarchist party, a socialist party. We don't seem to have any chance at all of getting a candidate to the presidential level right now, but we can certainly do it at local levels, mayorships, city councils. We can do it in state legislatures. We can do it in Congress. We can do it in the House of Representatives. Maybe a much tougher row in the Senate where you need a whole statewide electorate to make that happen. But maybe there are districts, maybe there are congressional districts that can sneak in a socialist, an anarchist, a social democrat. We got to have some success at the local, state, and even federal level because some congressional districts are in play. And we got to get there. And then we got to advocate, we got to fight for ranked choice voting, for things like proportional representation. We got to get this fixed. Populism is here to stay. It's not going anywhere for at least a generation or two or three and maybe more. But populism in the hands of right-wing extremism is, now you're talking just straight Nazi. You're talking Hitler, you're talking fascist, you're talking Mussolini, you're talking this little podcast host will be in jail. And this is not hyperbole. This is what these guys want to do. They want to put doctors in jail. They want to put journalists in jail. They want to make podcasters have to register their podcast and be subject to censorship. They want to ban books. They want to take away women's rights. They want to take away LGBTQ rights. We're talking straight 30s Nazi nightmare. And they call it populism. The so-called centrists, the Joe Bidens of the world, are never going to defeat them. They're only going to ride slowly with them, yelling compromise and love your neighbor all the way to hell. We got to have a left-wing populism that will speak to the people who know and understand the problems in their own lives. They're not making it up. They're not pretending to have these problems. All right, let's drop it there. By the time you hear this, we may have a verdict in the hush money trial. If that happens, we'll see. Depending on how late it happens this week or early next week, I may jump in with a bonus episode. Or if it's close to next Thursday, I'll just handle it then. All right. Thanks for listening. As always, you can hear this episode on any of the platforms where you get your podcasts, or go to the website, charlespurcell.com. Everything you can find there is there. Thanks to our flagship terrestrial station, River West Radio, riverwestradio.com. And Peter Donalds wrote and performed our theme song. There it is. This is The Log. I'm Charles Purcell. See ya.